Oh my gosh. I'm the video curator, and at the same time I'm the person in the video. I'm Bill Ritchie, and I thought this video was lost and gone forever. Janet Fisher made it back in 2010 at Daniel Smith Inc., and I was doing a demonstration. But more than that, I was conducting the first printmaking party ever held in the world, you might say. Now my job is to convert this into a video file just for my Patreon members and for my virtual museum. First, a little background information. Daniel Smith Inc. Company used to have backroom workshops, 2 one-hour sessions. So I came in with 3 brand new mini halfwood presses for the party, and all the equipment I needed to show how to do what I called silly transfer etching, where I transfer a laser print to a copper plate and etch it and ink it and print it. Over on the side, we've set up 3 mini halfwoods and ink slab. I have the ink all mixed up. I have the paper ready, the plate, everything's ready to go for you, if you want to try printing after you've seen how I do it. Some of you may already know how to do this and you'll just walk right through it. I've never done this before, so I adjusted the ink so we don't have to warm it. Sometimes you see warming the plate is a necessary step. I mixed up some of the Daniel Smith Miracle Gel Reducer, which does make the ink just so runny that, you know, it's really easy to wipe. Maybe it's too easy, but I have that all set up. So those stations are set up. The presses are adjusted for the right pressure. I have little protective pieces of newsprint along with the damp paper. It's a rag paper, a Fabriano printmaking paper. I think I've taken care of everything. I've even made special little what we call sticky pads. Sticky pads are so that when you're wiping the plate, it doesn't fly around and you don't have to hold it. It just sort of sits there. It's kind of nice. Brayers. I'm going to show you all those steps in the course of the first period that we're here together. On the far end of the table, I have, on the far end of the table, I have an etching that I did, I think, a year or so ago. I brought that because the one I'm doing today is first trial proof and might not be so great. You know, they have a way of being kind of crummy, the first ones. And so I brought one to show that what I could really do. And I have a free postcard, I have business cards, and some takeaway paper. And there's also a calendar. Mary has the calendar that I want to show you. You can get that calendar by contacting me, and I go to Office Max and have a new one made for you. It's, I think, $25 for the calendar, I think it's $19 for the calendar. And so that's another possibility. People always say, are the presses for sale? Yes, they're for sale. I'm making 49 presses this year. We are on number 72. That price of 72 is, I think, $790. They go up 1% with each one that's sold. So number 100 is $1,150 or something like that. Again, if you're interested, I'm online. My website is printmakingworld.com. You could also say halfwoodpress.com and it would still get there. They pointed out to me that on the website, Daniel Smith website, they left off the www. So when you click that, it just takes you back to a 404 error. So you got to put in the www and then you're home free. That is about it. So now I'll get started with the technical part, but before I start, have I left anything out that you need to know? Any questions? Looks like I did okay. What I have up here is what I call the silly transfer process. Silly transfer is a name I made up for silicone-coated paper. It's not so exotic. It might sound exotic. Have you ever bought a postage stamp? Has everybody bought a postage stamp? That's a stupid question. You buy postage stamps and they come off that little backing paper. That's because that backing paper is silicone-coated. And when you start looking around, there are all kinds of products that are silicone-coated paper. The backs of contact paper, that little thing they send you when you do your license plate, you know, the tabs on your license plate, silicone-coated. It's because silicone doesn't stick to anything. This is another example of a product. It's called label paper, and I make shipping labels for occasional projects, and I peel off the sticky stuff, peel off the paper, and sometimes I have to buy a pack of this stuff and tear. I'm still looking for a source of can you just buy the blank silicone paper? And so far, you have to be a factory to buy it on a huge roll, but we may find it. That does stick to everything. So I'm going to have to kind of role play this through. This is silicone coated paper that I just took out my thing, out of the trash, you might say. You run this through your laser printer. That's all you do. Well, I set up the toner so it's the blackest black it will print. That way I get the most toner, because that is going to be your etching ground, your resist. Then I just run it through a laser printer and it comes out. I have a little sample of it here, which I cut down. Here are two samples of what it looks like when it comes out of the laser printer. You're printing on the shiny side. And this is laser print, not inkjet. We've had one experience with inkjet print, not for etching, but for another relief process. And inkjet will print on silicone paper as long as it's the lightest possible black. Isn't that right, Janet? 20%. 20%, the lowest possible setting. But this is laser. I want to emphasize that because the toner is acid proof, it's mordant proof, it's ferric chloride proof. Toner is a kind of a thermoplastic. It comes in powder form. So that's what they look like, since I cut it down. When it came out of the laser printer, of course, it was a full sheet, and I just cut them down. So that's what I'm going to be using. Secondly, I have copper plate. Now, I'm an old school printmaker, so I like metal. I like copper, I like brass. I don't like zinc, but I love copper. I think it's so wonderful. This is 22 gauge, which is much cheaper than 18 or 16 gauge, and for my mini presses, it's all I need. In fact, with big presses, you still can get by with 22 gauge copper. The trouble is they don't sell it in art supply stores, so you go to Alaska Copper and Brass, you buy a big sheet, you cut it down, you've got 22 gauge copper. 24 by 36 page costs about $35, I think. When I sell these to people that need my, send to me, I think it's like $1 a piece or something because of the labor, mostly. Copper. I've polished it a little bit. I've gone over it with triple-aught steel wool to kind of put a little haze, just a kind of a little tooth on it, so it won't be too glossy. Because I think the toner kind of likes something to hang on to. And when I'm done with the process I'm going to show you, it'll look something like this. This is the plate that's been, has this been etched? No, it hasn't been etched. I'm saving this to show you how it's etching. Again, I'm doing the Julia Childs thing. Other products I have on the table. Whiting. This is for degreasing the copper plate, because we can't have any fingerprints or oils or any resistance to the toner. We want it to be perfectly clean. So we use whiting and vinegar. I'll show you how that works for degreasing. The secret to my success has been the laminator. This is an office laminator, just like you put driver's licenses and ID cards and stuff through. I bought it online for about $60 or $80, I don't remember what. They make a half-size one, which I kind of like to have. It's even cheaper. And it was made by BG, I think, Office Supplies. GBC, General Business something. Wonderful thing that I bought. I used to use a hand iron. When I started demonstrating this several years ago, I was using a hand iron. It kind of works about 70% of the time. Not too much. Never tried it. The temperature's about 285 to 300 degrees, so it should work. I think that goes up to 350 or something. Yeah. So this works. And the heat gun, which I use following the transfer. I then give it one more shot of heat to kind of further melt the toner. I'll show you how that looks now. Take off the gloves. Here's my copper plate. Step one, do you remember what I have to do before I do anything else? Degrease it, right. And that's fun. And you've got a mirror that you can watch this. Am I right? It's focused and everything. The way I do it is I put the little vinegar on the plate first. Like that. And a little whiting. Whiting is calcium carbonate. Chalk. And it fizzes up. It's all fizzy and bubbly.
What's that high-tech tool you use to get the...
Oh, this comes from, it's a coffee shop straw. No, couldn't think of a joke. And Brillo pad. I notice there are 2 people in our audience today who already own Halfwood presses. And I didn't pay them to come in and give testimonials, but I'm probably sounding very commercial today, I think. Well, I'm excited because I've never brought in brand new mini Halfwoods for other people to use before the owner uses them. Every press I make, I test myself, and I sometimes make videos and put them on YouTube. You could go to YouTube and see them. But this is the first time I'm going to say perhaps test 3 presses at once with other people helping.
So that's just a re-scouting pad? You said Brillo pad.
Did I say the wrong thing?
I don't know. Brillo pads usually have cleanser and stuff in it.
Oh, does it?
Oh,
I don't know. What's this called? Handy wiper, scrubber pad? Scrubber pad.
Basically, it's a green,
Yeah, this doesn't have anything in it. It's just a sponge with...
It's the green.
but it is abrasive.
Green
So,
scrubber.
Yeah.
is it less abrasive than?
Oh, it's not
the
abrasive.
3X?
It kind of fogs up a polished plate. Yeah, it's slightly abrasive.
Brillo's abrasive.
Is it?
Yeah.
Brillo's really abrasive. Okay, then I shouldn't have said Brillo.
Just get them about the sponge, do those grapes, and they're good for
Oh,
us.
okay. Well, you could probably use a rag for that matter.
Yeah.
And then you have to rinse it off. I brought a bucket of water. And then I need to dry it. I get all the whiting and the vinegar off of it. The heat gun was another good investment. The plates like to be hot when they first go in the laminator. In fact, one of the etching plates that I made over there, I didn't preheat it, and half of it floated off the plate. But then it looked kind of nice, so I went ahead and etched it. And we'll see how it looks.
Does the 100 gauge copper go through the press?
Excuse me?
Laminators?
I have put 16 gauge through. It doesn't like it, it groans and complains, but it hasn't broken yet, so. I turned this on about 10 minutes ago. And so it's warmed up. They say in the instructions to be sure to warm it up for about a half hour. But I think that's overdoing it. And it's going to get so hot that I'll have to use pliers, a pair of pliers to hold on to it. So I give it one more warming. I learned that it likes to be pre-warmed. And also, if the paper has any moisture in it, this pre-warming is going to get rid of the moisture. I wouldn't want to preheat it so much that it began sticking to the toner, because the toner melts. This is always a tricky part of getting it in when the paper's trying to curl up and resist. There's no business like show business when you're trying an art. Come on. The plate is so hot I can hardly touch it there. Okay, now I can heat it in. And it's so slow. But it has to be. And I put it through about 3 or 4 times.
I don't really know if I need to, but it's one of those things that you might as well, because if you didn't leave it in long enough, you're going to lose your work. So you can see that it's already stuck down, so it might be adequate. I always think someday I'm going to be in this workshop and we're all going to answer all these questions finally, once and for all. How many times you really have, what is the actual temperature, all those variables, because you know how it is when you're working in your studio or your shop, you just sort of feel it works and then that's it. And if it worked, didn't work the next time, you wonder, why didn't it work? And you'll never know, unless you approach it in a scientific way, or at a workshop. Any questions so far? Next, I'm going to just let it cool. And, oh, I can pass this around. I'll let it do kind of do that. You
I
can,
do have a question though. Was the copper plate still wet with the vinegar that you applied to chalk?
what was the what?
The copper plate that you degreased with vinegar, was it still wet with the vinegar when you did the next step and you applied the chalk, or did you dry the plate?
I put the vinegar down first,
Okay,
and then I spilled the whiting into the vinegar.
I see, I get it.
If you put the powder first, and you put the vinegar on it, it kind of goes everywhere.
Okay.
You know, it's like you just blew on that pile of powder,
Yes.
because it's really light. That calcium carbonate is really light. I'm going to say that's adequate, and just let it cool for the sake of time. Here's the plate now with the backing on it. I have to put acid-proof backing on the back. Now there's a little contact paper, piece of contact paper around here somewhere. Where did I put that? Contact paper, of course, is acid-proof. There it is. It's a little piece. You know, the contact shelf paper that you buy, the self-adhesive back. Because if you put the plate in the mordant now, you'd be etching the back of it as well. No real harm in it, you're going to lose that much, except that you buy the mordant for, what, $26 a gallon for ferric chloride out here on the shelf. I don't have the gallon, but I pour it into small pint bottles just because I don't like handling a great big jug. I'm going to do that now, even though this paper has not come off. Well, it wants to come off, so I'll let it come off. Y'all can see? With what? Did you say miracle?
Mirror.
Oh, mirror.
Yeah. Not quite filled right there.
Okay.
It's not quite changed.
So, yeah, it's a little crooked, but you know, this is just show you this. But now I'm going to give it that other shot of heat. This is essential. If you don't do this, there are microscopic, well, there are holes, little pits all through this from the original laser print. Because laser printers, at least mine does, only prints dots actually, and still need little microscopic white holes in the ground. By giving it a shot, you do two things. It helps fill in those holes, and it also gives a better adhesion, I think. It helps it adhere better. And I don't know the temperature again, what a heat gun puts out, they get pretty hot. But I judge by just, you can't tell from where you're sitting, of course, but I can tell that the coating, that black coating, it goes from a kind of a dull, totally matte, velvety black to a kind of a dull sheen, like a satin black. And that's when I know that it's hot enough. And it's way too hot to handle right now, so don't touch it. When it's cool, I'll pass it around and you can fool with it. I've played with the idea of using that as an etching ground, going back and needling into it, but it's flaky. It kind of chips off, and so far I haven't made it work very well for that purpose. The fastest way to cool it is to lay it on a metal surface or a glass surface, and this is glass. So, on there we go. This one is all set to go, all backed and so forth, so I'm going to put it right into the mordant. And here's a trick. This, if you're using ferric chloride, which is not an acid, it's a mineral salt, You can't burn yourself on it. You can stain your clothes, you can stain your skin and so forth, but it's pretty harmless. I'm not afraid to put it down the pipes in the plumbing when it's all spent. I dilute it with lots of water and run it down the pipes. It's not an acid. It won't ruin your plumbing. And as far as I know, it's not hard on the environment. An engineer from Woodinville once told me, he worked for the water department, and he said, oh, we buy that stuff by the barrel for some kind of water treatment process. So I need to learn more about what ferric chloride really is, but for one thing, we're sure it's not an acid, it's a mineral salt. It won't burn you, or it won't irritate your lungs and your nostrils and those kind of things. Ferric chloride is all I've used for the last 7 or 8 years. I haven't seen nitric acid, which is the old thing we used to use for a long, long time. The only catch is it has to be upside down when you etch it. In the old days, we enjoyed watching it bubble and, fizz and so forth. Then we wondered why our nose felt so funny. Not funny. You have to etch it upside down or on its side. And they sell tanks, actually, great big red tanks that you buy for, I don't know, $100, $200 for suspending plates. But I've gone to small is beautiful. Use small trays and little simple processes so that you don't have to invest in those expensive trays. And you suspend it by picking the plate up this way with a piece of tape, and then laying it on the side in the pan like so. You see it, not cute? And then you can pour in the ferric chloride. One pint usually is enough. In my bigger trays, of course, I used to have a whole quart. And you can untape this packing tape over and over. Just you can use clear packing tape, any kind of packing tape, and make sure that there are no bubbles trapped on there. You can tap it and jiggle it and so forth, and then leave it. 10 or 15 minutes, depending on the temperature, how new and fresh your ferric chloride is, those two variables, how fresh it is and the temperature. You could, if you put a light on this and warmed it up, you could maybe get it in 5 minutes. But it's usually 70 degrees, and I just leave it for 15 minutes or so. And I don't use strict timetables. I take it out after 10 or 15 minutes, and I have a magnifier somewhere. It's a loop. A magnifying glass, anything, and you can set it right down on the plate and look at the texture, and that becomes a good judge. And again, it's one of those things that with some practice, you sort of tell just by looking at it that it's okay, it's ready to go. I'm not real precise in my plate making. I like to be a bit surprised each time, sometimes discouraged or have to do it over. But printmaking to me is a creative process from A to Z, from the beginning. And even after you've done the plates and started printing multiples, even the multiples start looking a little different from one another. So to me, they're more like music scores or something that you're performing them over and over again. So I can leave this here until someone says, hey, that's been in there for 45 minutes, and I'll take it out and look at it. But because I've already etched plates and got ready to go, I can just print. So I'm going to kind of put away some of these things that need them now and become a printmaker. I've been a plate maker now for the last few minutes, and now I'm going to be a printmaker. I used to teach that printmaking consists of 2 things, plate making and printmaking. This is cool, by the way, so I can put the backing on. Face down and score on the edges. And I'll pass it around. Oh, that's not good. The tape is sticking to the sticky paper. And I fold over the edges. The plates that I did yesterday for this demo, I followed up with some touch-up with stop-out varnish. I didn't bring any today because it's slow drying. It's alcohol-based stop-out varnish. They sell it here. I think it's called stop-out varnish in the store here. It's an alcohol-based solution of rosin and alcohol. And we can pass that around. This is ready to etch. You know, I just remembered, this is the plate I'm supposed to print. It's been etched. I etched it yesterday, I just sort of forgot. So now I'm etching it again, and that's okay. The only trouble is, the only way to get that ground off of there is with lacquer thinner. And I can't use that in here. I mean, I don't even want to. This will get at your brain, it will cause brain damage. And the worst symptom finally after years of using lacquer thinner will be extreme paranoia. And I'm not kidding. Lacquer thinner will make you paranoid after some years and maybe even worse. So you only can use it outdoors with lots of ventilation. I brought it here because I usually run outside and clean my plate off and then I come back in. But so often what happens, I come back in and everybody left. So, just kidding. So you can etch.
No other solvent takes that off?
If you really scrub with mineral spirits,
Yeah, so you have to scrub.
no, scrub and
So
scrub.
therefore you're ruining your,
Well, it doesn't hurt the copper if you're just using copper, cotton rag or something. I've tried naphtha. Well, of course, acetone will take it off, but it's worse than lacquer thinner. No, I would say it's the fastest thing. And if you just step outside and clean it, it's done in a second. It just comes off in a flash. So I will, Janet, if you'd be kind enough to hand me that little copper plate there, I'll use it to get started so people can see where we're going with all this.
This one?
Yes. Thank you. And I think I'll put this up here out of the way. That's really going to be deep etched when I remember to go back to it. The size of the plate, by the way, is 2.5 by 3.5 inches. And this has become a kind of a standard size for many of my projects. It's the playing card size. It's artist trading card size. You've heard of artist trading cards by now. Even Strathmore, the big paper company, has picked up on artist trading cards. They're selling packs of ready-made 2.5 by 3.5 inch papers where you can do watercolors or drawings and make artist trading cards. So I've sort of settled on that as a nice standard for my copper plates, the little test plates that I send out. And since I'm making 49 of them this year, in the past I had to sort of come up with a new idea for every press I sold and tested, and I just frankly can't do it. I just can't keep coming up with that many different ideas. So I thought, well, why not settle on one idea and just keep playing it? So I'll probably make 49 copper plates, about the same image, but who knows what they will come to in the months to come. So this is my new approach. This is a piece of mat board paper, the chip that I cut down. And as I said, I mixed Miracle Gel Reducer in this ink. The ink, by the way, is Daniel Smith Process Black. And I'm just scraping it around on the plate to get the ink into the texture. I got way too much. It's better to start out with too much than too little, as a matter of fact, but that was way too much. And then with a brayer, I roll it back out so that it's even, and then I begin the wiping process. Normally, we always recommended in printmaking that you use tarlatan to wipe the plate. Tarlatan is a loose weave fabric, stiff cotton fabric that doesn't wipe the ink out of the texture but makes it even. I since has sort of gone away from using tarlatan. I like to use telephone page paper. Here's my brayer, and the purpose of the brayer is to get the ink even so that when I start wiping, it's going to come up evenly instead of having streaks in it. All these plates have never been printed, so those of you who stick around and print them, you'll be the first ones to print them. I see a spot here, which means there's a little bit of dead ink. because I buy the ink by the can sometimes, and when you buy ink by the can and you don't keep a skin on it, it makes its own skin of dead ink, and those little spots will turn up in your inking sometimes. And finally, the paper wipe. Telephone page. There we go. With my glove on, the paper will tend to stick to my glove to a degree, or as much as I'd like it. I think maybe my ink is a little too sticky yet, so I'm going to have to hold the paper. The object is, of course, not to wipe out the ink from the textures. It appears as though I might have several little pieces of dead ink in there that I'm just going to have to tolerate them for this first trial proof. The other reason I don't recommend tarlatan as much as I used to is that it tends to wipe out these plates that are very lightly etched. Whereas this paper wipe technique leaves it alone. It leaves the ink in the texture where it belongs. Then there's the hand wipe. I don't like the way that is leaving freckles all over the place, although, maybe it'll be kind of interesting. There's such a thing as production printing. And the rules are different in production printing. You usually start with a very well-defined image in mind, and then you work toward that clearly defined image as a product, because you have a business. In creative printmaking, I like to call it, it's more like jazz. You make these plates, and then you start playing them, printing them, and see what happens, and go with the flow. So I'm getting freckles on my plate here from dead ink, and in the next proof I probably would not use that. I would clean that ink up. I guess I may be intimidating a few people here who want to print, and I'm going to give you all this ink with dead ink in it, so you will all learn something from this. I am going to leave it because it's no fun watching you struggle. Then the edges should be clean. You should clean the edges any way you can. There's a piece of paper. I can just clean it with paper. Piece of cotton cloth. The plates edges have been beveled, by the way. You'll notice when you get over to the printing stations that there's a little tiny bit of bevel. I don't like sharp edges on my plate. They leave their mark on the blanket sometime as a little bruise or a cut. And especially if you're using 16 gauge or thicker copper plates or plastic plates, they can really wreak havoc on your plates and your paper. They can actually cut through your paper. So I put little bevels on.
What do you use to bevel? What's the best thing to use to bevel the edge?
It's called 45 degree.
Or do you do it by hand or what?
I now have a bench grinder,
Yeah.
and I have been using a belt sander.
Oh,
But I always used a hand file.
well, that's,
Yeah. The hand file is just as, it's just that now that I have to make plates for other people, I started using machines because it's not much fun with a hand file.
but it's okay to do it with a hand.
It's best to do it with a hand file. Good exercise. Gives you time to contemplate having a machine someday. There, that's clean. You've heard of the hand wipe, perhaps. This is where you use the heel of your hand, this chunky meaty part here. And sometimes a little talcum powder. Your store. Why am I saying possesses? It's not ours. They sell talcum powder. But this is baby powder. Same thing. Except that you get perfume with it. And you very lightly and rapidly wipe the plate with that part of your hand. Sticky pad helps keep the plate from flying around. That one's kind of old and greasy. This one's better. Those freckles are going to be actually kind of nice, I think. Of course, I'll never have them again. That will qualify this as a monoprint. It's a monoprint is a print that's made from a plate that's been etched or drawn upon somehow. And a monotype is just a bare plate with a painting on it that you printed on the press. There. That'll do. Now my hands are fairly clean. If I had any doubts about my hands being clean and dry for handling paper, I might put a little more talc on to dry up any ink that's there. Paper, I've pre-packaged little, I think 4 sheets of Fabriano printmaking paper in baggies. I soaked them last night in water for 15 or 20 minutes, and I took them out, blotted them off, so they look like so. And they're very soft, cold paper. I also have newsprint because I like to protect my blanket from getting dirty. And I might mention that these blankets go to people in California and Michigan. They're their blankets that you're going to use. So use the piece of paper to protect the blanket from getting any ink on it. I'll put the rest of this back. Here, you sit here. Another paper I use frequently is Mignani. I love Mignani. It comes in beige, and I love gray and white. And Arches cover. I love Arches cover. But this is Fabriano. I also have little envelopes in that far end of the table there, envelopes. So when you print today, you take that with you, and the envelope is to protect it. Now it's still going to be damp, but at least it won't get smeared and so forth. It'll be protected in that little envelope. Of course, when you get home, the envelope will be all curly as well, but best I can do. Paper has 2 sides. I tend to use the rougher of the 2 sides, the rougher appearing. And I've adjusted the pressure ahead of time. I'm also on those presses, so I don't need to do that, but that's what this business is for. The new presses have a brass marker on the side, so you can kind of get a rough idea as to the pressure, but I have always gone by how tight it feels. I like to judge by the feel. There's the plate. This press comes with a music box, but it's the only one. I had a discussion this morning with a guy who came in, and he said you could put that in there with a chip this size and a tiny battery, and you wouldn't have to have a wind-up music box. Not a bad idea. Because now I have to say, no, I can't put music boxes in the main pathways. There's my newsprint. Oh, one more thing. I have a funny rule. It's called the moment number. And that's the moment you pull the proof. And you go with the dates, and I have this made up little fantasy land where there's these islands, and I think today we're at Arizona, I'm not sure. And the year 2010, the month 02, and the day 20, and the time, which looks like 44, 11:44. And that's the moment the print was made. And that way, instead of using edition numbers and such, it's the moment number. And there's the print. It's kind of nice. Not bad for a first state proof. So I'll pass these around so you can look at them. And clean up the, I can't clean up the plate that's passing around. Well, I do have to take this out of the bath because it's been etching way too long. And in fact, I think I will run into the back room and clean it off and print it. I'm kind of curious as to how it will look. I think what will happen in the end is the people who own these presses, 49 people out there will have these plates, because you get the plate with the press that was tested, you see. And so there'll be these 49 copper plates out there. I'm editioning plates. In printmaking we edition prints. When I'm editioning the plates. And they're not all alike because I make every one of them by hand. So it's kind of fun, like a game where you don't know how it's going to turn out in the end. This is always fun, pouring the mordant back into the bottle. I normally bring a funnel, but I forgot. And we'll just see how nervous I am. Guess I'm not nervous. I seem to be doing all right. If you do use ferric chloride, don't use it in a stainless steel sink because it has a tendency to stain the stainless steel sink. So if you work in your kitchen like I did for a long time, you have a stainless steel sink, you're going to make enemies. Not bad. Now I have to clean the plate. You know, there's some things that happen when you're in printmaking that are just beautiful that no one ever sees. Did you see when I poured the thing in this beautiful yellow colors and so forth? Well, I started an idea called the 12 Beauties of Printmaking. I want to do a calendar, and I want to have a contest, and everybody sends photographs of these beautiful things they saw when they were doing the printmaking. Might be the way the ink was looking when it was rolled out or something like that. And everybody submits these photographs to judges, and the judges pick the best 12. And that's made into a calendar. Isn't that a cool idea? Because there's so many things that happen when you're making prints that no one else gets to see. They just see the print, the end product. But I think there are all these beautiful things that happen that could be shared with a photographic record. By the way, I should have mentioned this. I also use spray paint on this plate to get an aquatint effect. Aquatint is a speckle process. It's a tonal process. The laser technique is good for lines, but it's not so good for tones. It's a little hard to control. And so I use spray paint right on the corner. If you see these plates, they've all used a little touch of spray paint somewhere for a speckled tonal effect. It's kind of unpredictable because using a spray can, which is what I use primer. I use auto body primer paint. I use red or, in this case, white. And for some reason, I think the red worked better, but I don't have it anymore. So, and also, this plate has the rosin stock out on it, the alcohol based. And it's going to take me a few minutes to get this all cleaned off with a lacquer cleaner. So I'm going to run out into the back, and you can stretch your legs. And if it's, never mind. I'm just going to go back and.
After the demonstration, we then started our party. I didn't call it a party at the time. Here's the thing. This was 2010, and it was one of the best years for sales of the mini Halfwood press, the original model. And with every press, I tested it with my little printing plate. And I videotaped the test. It was a lot of work, in other words. And so when I decided to do the backroom demonstration at Daniel Smith Ink Company, I saw it as an opportunity to get someone else to print the plates because I didn't have time. And so it was sort of like, I call it the Tom Sawyer effect, where Tom decides to get his friends to paint the fence for him. Anyway, so the party itself was not planned to be a party. It was just a kind of a chance to give everybody a turn at printing a plate. And that's what resulted. It was fun. It really did have a kind of a party atmosphere because virtually everyone in the group had never printed before. The thing is, though, however, this later was the seed for the idea of sip and print. Sip and print is based on sip and paint, which was introduced right around the recession in 2007, 2008, when two women in Louisiana, women painters, needed money, and so they invited people to come to their studios, and they would supervise painting. It was not original. They were kind of copying what the two women told them to do. It was like paint by number, and many painters would shy away from that because it lacks originality and all that kind of thing. But it did turn out to be revolutionary because that turned into what's called the sip and paint industry, and the American Small Business Administration pointed out that it was the fastest growing franchise of the year. Think about that. In other words, it employed other painters kind of jumped on board, jumped on the bandwagon to the point where franchise designers showed that they could make a lot of money by opening these sip and paint businesses, and they franchised them. So they would have, dozens and dozens of franchises that were scattered around, and they all had different names and different management systems. But the important thing was that they employed painters, for example, who could teach, and they sold wine and beer, and everybody had a good time. The sip and paint business kind of was knocked on its, when the COVID pandemic came along, of course, you couldn't convene people in groups like that anymore. However, it left me with this lasting impression that the Halfwood Press could be the substitute for the little 16 by 20 canvases that sip and paint people use. And that's why I realized the 2010 demonstration and workshop that we did in the back room of the Daniel Smith Ink Company was probably a metaphor or the basis for showing that you could have a sip and print. And when I found this video in my archives, the recording made by Janet Fisher, and there is another recording made by Linda. It's of a lower resolution. However, when I found this, it was like, wow. And so I have restored it here, and it's part of my plan to continue with the whole idea. It may not happen quite the way I planned it, but this is certainly an improvement. By the way, what you're watching on the screen now is my favorite part of the video, where the woman in the white jacket prints her print, and if you watch, she claps her hand. You just have to enjoy this as much as I do when I watch it. It was what I eventually called the moment number, when someone prints a print and they take the sheet off the plate, and there's this moment, this kind of aha moment of reward and resolution, when the whole process of making the plate and inking it and wiping it and going through all the intermediary steps all comes together, and there's this moment. And you'll see too that I have instructed everybody to watch now. I love that. Anyway, she has to add the moment number. See, I say, wait a minute now, you have to add the moment number. So she said, where's a pencil? Where's a pencil? And they give her a pencil, and she writes down the calendar year and the month and the day and the minute using the 24-hour clock. And that's the moment number, which I continue to make a big deal about, because it's a moment of art, not necessarily an object of art, but a moment of art when you actually pull the proof. And finally, there's the sharing of the print itself, which is like an artifact of the moment. She holds it up.
Oh, it's beautiful.
This is my favorite thing. Well, I just wanted to add this little soundtrack to this session of the tape. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed restoring it. And thanks to Janet Fisher and my wife Linda for being there, and for the people who own those 3 presses. I'm Bill Ritchie. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching this historic video in my virtual museum.